Alrighty, hello everyone, this is Q Show here, and this took me a minute to try and figure out, because I was going to figure out how some of these students would be training, and it actually turned out to be quite easier than I thought. Now then, because of the Pussycats' more extreme nature in this what if, and the way that they were trained as judges, one thing that's happening is Kirishima and Tetsu they would be told that they need to harden up as much as they can, and they just need to keep fighting each other. Tetsu would explain that he needs to eat a lot of things with iron, and he would literally be handed an entire plate, just consisting of nothing but iron, telling him to eat up. Now, basically those two are beating the ever-loving shit out of each other over and over again. Each time one of them would fall to the ground, they would always help each other up and continue doing that over and over again. Yui, who essentially has the ability or the quirk to increase the size of anything she touches, her and Mina, those two would basically be training together as she basically has to increase the size of certain rocks she throws at her and actually just Mina would just have to destroy them as much as possible before they come at her, and if she can't destroy them, she'd be told that she has to dodge them. Now, because of that, she's basically essentially being told that she needs to train her acid. Ibarra, who is actually just the girl with vines, she's told that during the sports festival that was actually one of the most effective ways to train her quirk. Just to constantly destroy her vines and putting up defenses over and over again. So she'll be training with that boy that did that to her during the sports festival. But he is also going to be training by putting on essentially a weighted suit. Now then, Kendo, who essentially has the quirk Big Hands, she's training with Bakugo. And they said that an obvious weakness for her quirk is that those are still her hands. If you cut them, they will bleed. You can feel the pain. So, essentially, Deku or Bakugo is going to have to be firing explosions and fighting her, and this will actually help build her pain tolerance. Along with Uraka, who is actually told that she can manipulate the gravity around objects and redirect them. So she will have to do that for a lot of trees in the area. Since the vines, the boy with the flaming quirk, or the vines quirk, along with that one half and half boy, they're probably going to be setting fire to a lot of the area. So she's going to be in charge of, basically she's going to be on fire watch. And if you guys don't know what that is, it's basically where you spend most of your time running around and actually making sure the entire area is not on fire. Now, basically she's going to be doing that, and one thing they would tell her to do is she needs to, instead of standing up straight, she would have to bend at her knees at about a 45-degree angle and actually be mid squat, and she just had to stand there like that, looking around, trying to make sure everything around her is not on fire. And if you guys are confused about that, that is basically mid squat. So it's basically just her putting strain on the muscles in her legs and actually being able to run around and touch the objects and do all that, along with some very simple weights and movement training. Now then, development on at least half of Class 1A. The guy with the duplo arms, I want to say that he would actually be told that he needs to make as much of them as possible. And if not, if he can't make as many as he can, just keep going. So make different objects, different things, different parts of the body. Anyways. Now then. Because of that, everyone will actually be stronger and actually a bit more mentally trained to essentially be able to assess things in very, very high difficult situations. Which basically means they can actually keep their calm and keep their cool. And since Mineta is in this what if, that well needed character development is denied. Now then. Okay, that took way more time than I thought. Anyways, to the villain attack. Everyone's talking about the test of courage, and this is actually going to line up on the night of the villain attack. They're all talking about it, and this is whenever Deku and Uraka would actually be told that they need to go through first, or they need to go through, and they would do so. Now, as they are going through, this is whenever Uraka would try and ask Deku that question again, and she would actually confess to Midoriya. Now, before Deku can actually talk to her, this is whenever, or say something back to her, this is whenever Muscular would actually come in saying that he's sorry to interrupt their little love spout, but he has a question for them. They need to find a kid by the name of Shota Todoroki, along with some girl named Ibarra. Because One For All is actually thinking about how different quirks can mix together in this timeline. He's thinking about not only how can quirks be strong, but even if weak quirks are weak, they are actually still useful. Because you may be able to mix them together and create something brand new. So, like, if Ibarra's quirk and Todoroki's quirk mixed together, if you were to hit something with a vine, it can either light on fire or completely freeze. Or you can just create vines made of fire, which would basically be like Ghost Rider with dreadlocks, which actually sounds pretty metal now that I think about it. Just imagining that coming towards me on a motorcycle, with flaming dreadlocks, that is very cool. I need to look and see if there's a picture of that. That would be metal. Now then, basically, I'm sorry, but that was basically the briefest explanation possible that I can think of off the top of my head. I am sorry about that. Now then, because of this, Deku would say that he's not going to tell him where either of those two are, because he doesn't know where they are right now. But you face me. He's asking who that boy is, and Deku would just say that he is going to be a judge. Or he is going to be a hero. As he would immediately rush toward Muscular, and Muscular would have already augmented his arm and meet Deku's punch. Which would surprise Muscular, saying that usually not a lot of people survive that one punch. And here's a question for the kid. Do you know what they do whenever they can't put you in a crypto cube because of your quirk? Deku would say he doesn't care, as he would throw a second punch at Muscular, hitting him in the face and actually sending him a few feet back. Muscular would say that they don't just lock you up in a cell. They bury you 100 feet below the earth, if not 1,000. And they just leave you there as you scream over and over again with no one able to hear you. It's worse than hell. Because even then, all you're just left with is nothing. Now, on that sinister turn, this is whenever Deku, he would tell Uraka that she needs to run and actually go tell the teachers about what's going on. And as he was saying that, this is whenever he would begin to smell smoke, saying that there's more of them, or the forest is on fire. That doesn't make sense. He will endeavor. No, this is the wrong what if. This is whenever Muscular would say that that is probably that one kid they have on their team. Or that's probably one of our guys. He would then explain that not only is there more of them, but they're essentially all here for those two kids. And they are not leaving without them. Now then, because of this, Muscular would then begin fighting with Midoriya. And Muscular, seeing that Deku's essentially telling Uraka to get out of there, and she keeps trying to get close enough to Muscular, but he always just would swat her away like a fly. He would get very angry, and he'd actually use Fire Breath on Muscular. And because of how big the muscle tendons are, since One For All didn't work against them, Fire will not work against them either. Now then, because of this, Muscular is actually telling Midoriya that that's not going to work, as he would power through it and punch him into the forest. Now, actually doing so would quite hurt Midoriya, but he's still in good condition. He would then rush toward Muscular at about 80 to 90% of One For All, actually throwing punches at him. And these punches are actually big enough to where everyone can not only hear them, they are able to feel the surrounding shockwave. Which not only does it concern a lot of the villains because they think All Might is here, but it's actually putting out the fires and it's actually spreading the smoke from the mustard gas villain. It's actually blowing it away. Now, his quirk is essentially useless since it's double-edged, and he would be taken out easily along with Eraserhead and the Pussycats actually finding Dobby, and they would immediately just pump him full of. They would pump him full of. My bad, that disconnected. They would have immediately just pumped him full of tranquilizer darts, as he would just try and burn them out of his system with his quirk, which would not work. Now then, because of that, the mustard gas villain, he would have been captured and fairly easily. Deku and Muscular are still fighting, and this is whenever Muscular would actually charge toward Uraka, saying that she seems to be awfully important to him, and she's actually pissing him off. As he would actually go to throw a punch at Uraka, but Deku would get in the way, actually taking it, and actually falling over, somewhat with a broken jaw. Now then, because of this, Deku would immediately get up and throw a 100% punch at Muscular, and this will not work. As he's telling Muscular that he should not underestimate him, and he would then try picking up his telekinesis, and his nose would begin running with blood. Muscular saying that that might not work because he can just keep going back and back and back. And he'd be shouting at Midoriya that nothing he ever tries will work because he knows his face, he knows who he is. In fact, he's going to go after his mother next, even if he gets out. Now, actually hearing this would send Deku into overdrive, and he would actually just start trying to pull the muscle tendons out of Muscular's arm with his telekinesis. So he would rip Muscular's arms off with his telekinesis, and he would actually just be punching Muscular over and over again in his face in a blind rage. Now, in doing this, he would have immediately been told through telekinesis that somebody is missing, there's a villain, essentially 2 students are gone, and this is whenever Deku, he would immediately think that this is Ibara and Todoroki. Now, as soon as he would have heard that, Mr. Compress would have actually come by and compressed Muscular. As soon as that would happen, Mr. Compress goes to leave, but Deku would have immediately jumped through the air and actually try to hit Mr. Compress with fire. Now, this would actually burn off his mask, if not sear it to his skin. So he's actually screaming in pain, and Deku doesn't care, as he would go to punch Mr. Compress, and he would immediately have his arm. Well, he would immediately be compressed, but the force behind the shockwave would have actually sent Mr. Compress straight into a tree, actually getting him impaled on a branch, killing him instantly. Now, that is a little morbid, but it works. Now then, because of that, well, I already know what happens to Mr. Compress in Season 4, so I'm sorry. Never mind. I already know some of the things that go on in season 4, so this does not change the story up quite a lot. Now then, because of that, they would have immediately be decompressed and actually return back, along with Muscular actually falling to the ground, somewhat paralyzed, actually screaming. He's screaming in pain because he was unconscious, but now he is conscious again. As the Pussycats would come over and they would see Mr. Compress, and he's still trying to use his quirk. He's actually using it as much as he can to try and create a new arm to actually punch Midoriya with. Now, Tiger actually seeing this would have immediately just shot Mr. or Muscular in the face with a gun, and he would have actually used an incendiary round, bringing it through the back of Muscular's mouth into his top of his spine, actually somewhat paralyzing him, but the flare that would go off in his mouth would kill him. Now then, the Lizard Man and the other people along with Toga, they would have immediately been captured in the moments following, along with the Nomus actually being tracked, and Deku is actually somewhat injured. He would have to go to the hospital, get a lot of bandages, have to get his jaw reset, along with having a dentist look at his teeth, and he would actually have to be examined because the strain he may have put on his arms may have actually tore something. Now then, that being that, they would have somewhat scolded Deku on what he did to the villain, and they're not scolding him because of what he did to the villain. It's because he didn't finish the job. Because I don't know if I mentioned it or not, my last part, but whenever they went outside the walls of the mega city, they didn't have bikes, but they were given full permission to use their quirks, and if need be, to kill to survive. But they were not allowed to kill each other. In fact, they were told that their best chance of survival would be to stick together. And they know that some people here in particular do not like doing that, not being in groups, because being in a big group may attract attention. So they would have actually divided up into 2 small teams. Now then, they would have scolded Deku on how a judge doesn't let who they're judging suffer, and that essentially he was beyond saving. Because Deku would explain that he kind of lost it after Muscular talked about going after his mother and his father. Now then, aside from that, this is where I'm going to be leaving off this part, because all I have left to cover is the All for One attack, and then I can get started on a new What If. Now then, I hope you guys have enjoyed the video and have an amazing day, because the next What If is probably going to be fairly shorter. Now, the video has ended, so if you guys don't want to listen to this, you can actually just click off the video now. The next What If I'm going to be doing is what if Deku was the Nomu that was originally going to attack the USJ. This is a fan-recommended What If, so the timeline will actually diverge right after the last day of middle school. This is whenever it would happen. I actually have quite a bit of things set up, and I need to find a couple pictures, because someone eventually had the idea for this being an alternate universe. So they made a story where right after the Stain attack, the timelines diverge where that Nomu that picked Deku up actually got away. And Deku essentially had quirks put into him, quirks taken out of him, and he actually is... He is worse than Todoroki, because he's a selective mute. And Todoroki has begged him to talk before and has cried in this comic. It's both heartbreaking and beautiful because of how creative it is. Because it has everyone in Class 1A trying to bring Deku back to his normal self, and it is just... Anyways, I'm sorry. That went on a little bit too long. I hope you guys enjoyed the Well, I know I already just said to click off the video if you guys didn't want to hear it, but for those who did stick around, thank you, because that shows that certain people actually do like other things I do, and not just the what ifs. They just stick around because they like to hear me sometimes talk, which not a lot of people find me interesting at all in real life. Now then, goodbye, guys.